Good morning. Happy Friday. Want to talk a little economics today as it is the end of the week here, and wanted to discuss briefly the idea of the minimum wage. I think we're all familiar with this concept, but I wanted to try to think a little bit deeper about it today and use some economic data to evaluate its true effect. And I think we can all agree that the minimum wage is designed to help new entrants to the labor market, people that are inherently inexperienced and relatively low skilled, and has the implementation of a minimum wage actually helped this demographic of people? And based on the data, the answer is overwhelmingly no, it has not. Knowing that teenagers represent a large segment of this demographic in question here, we can go all the way back to the 1950s when this minimum wage was initially proposed, and you see that the unemployment rate among teenagers skyrocketed. It skyrocketed. And the reason is because the people that were hiring low-skilled workers, small businesses, big businesses, they're in it to make money. Small business owners pour their blood, sweat, and tears into their business. They rely on it for their livelihoods. And even big businesses, they have a great responsibility to provide for their shareholders. And if you come in there and you're only capable of producing $5 an hour worth of productivity, and the government comes in and says, well, you got to pay that person 10, do you really think that Mr. Small Business Owner is going to hire that individual? No. Of course not. They're not going to take a $5 loss every hour that person works. No, he's going to do that task himself, or he's going to try to automate the position, or in the worst case, he's going to have to suffer that loss to the extent that he has to close his business down. So one of the primary means of compensation in an entry-level job role is on-the-job training. It's a means of cultivating the skills that you need to demand a higher wage in the future, making yourself more valuable to your future employers. And the minimum wage denies people the opportunity to, get that on-the-job training, especially in low-income areas. The government's really hitting them with a double whammy of a piss-poor education and then levying a minimum wage to prevent them from entering the labor market. It's really terrible. There's so many lenses you can use to examine the negative effects that this has had. A good micro example of how how detrimental the minimum wage is if you look at the American Samoa. It's this tiny island that became a U.S. territory, and when it became a U.S. territory, the U.S. Implemented the minimum wage there, and it completely collapsed their economy, completely destroyed. Their unemployment skyrocketed, and their economy completely collapsed. You can look at the fact that trade unions are some of the biggest lobbyists to government for the minimum wage. And think about that. Why would trade unions care about minimum wage? They're on the opposite end of the spectrum. Those guys are skilled laborers. Why do they care about the minimum wage guys? Why do they care what the minimum wage is? Well, they know that a high minimum wage is going to force their competition of low skilled laborers out of the market, and their people are going to hire high skilled guys. If you have a manufacturing company that and you have a workstation that can be operated by 3 unskilled laborers or 1 skilled laborer, and the skilled guy demands $30 an hour, well, if you can pay the unskilled guys $7 each, well, now you're looking at $21 an hour versus 30, to operate that workstation. Of course, you're going to use the lower skilled guys. It's going to give them an opportunity to cultivate some skills and to ultimately move into the skilled laborer category. But if the government, again, comes in and says, well, no, you got to pay those unskilled guys, you got to pay them $15 an hour each. Well, now you're going to looking at $45 an hour using low-skilled labor versus $30 using skilled labor. Of course, you're going to choose the skilled guys. You're going to choose the union guys. And you're going to force those unskilled guys out of the market again. So, the data is overwhelmingly clear. In fact, one of the greatest economists to ever live, Dr. Milton Friedman, he talked quite a bit about this. He proposed the idea and illustrated it much more eloquently and concisely than I ever could. I'm going to link a video to him talking about this below, so you can see what I mean. But some of these things, while they're, the people that proposed them had the best of intentions, I'm sure, some of this stuff requires a little bit more critical thinking, a little bit deeper thinking to realize the true effect that it's having. So hope that sheds some light, hope that gets a few people thinking, and have a great weekend.